So I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon to speak on my health blog. I'm here with a guitar virtuoso, a good friend, and international fingerstyle champion, Mr. Mark Sganga. And we're going to be talking about healthy lifestyle. And we don't usually associate musicians and healthy lifestyles. We usually don't use them in the same sentence. But I think Mark is an exception. We've all seen the old movies about the jazzers and the rock and rollers and all the hard living that they do. I've read the autobiography of Keith Richards. I think you have too.
Yes, I have.
And how the man is still alive is a medical mystery. Or the reality is that being a professional musician, it's a very physically demanding job, and I think far more so than the average viewer appreciates what you do on a daily basis. So having said that, what do you do to physically keep yourself in shape?
That's a good question. I'm a lifelong runner to begin with, although I don't know that that is helping me other than in stamina. Yeah. The thing that helped me a lot with the kinds of difficulties that playing a guitar gives me is swimming. I'm an avid swimmer, and I learned some years ago to be a bilateral swimmer. So that is that I breathe on my left side and my right side. I'm alternating. So, breath, stroke, stroke, breath, stroke, stroke. Now, for about an additional 20 years, I've become quite involved with yoga. That helps tremendously.
Why did you start with yoga?
I have always been someone who, although they're strong and keeps himself in shape, was not as flexible as I would like to be. And I was beginning to feel that, hey, I'm not as loose as I could be. And I thought it would help, and sure enough, it helped a lot. And I studied at an Iyengar yoga school and with an Iyengar professor, and they're very specific, and the practice could be very physical, which suited me. So I do handstands, and I do push-ups in my handstands, and I do a lot of aggressive kinds of moves, relatively speaking. Another thing that helps, I don't know if the camera is seeing this, we have the TRX set up here. This has been really great. I do a bunch of different exercises, starting with these kind of open arm things and then lots of traditional pulling things, but being very conscious of moving chest forward. Playing an instrument's a repetitive stress disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you play the guitar and you're doing this, and it's not so hot, and then you go like that to try to look at what you're doing, and that's even worse. So,
and then hold that position for 3 hours.
Right. Starting with the swimming. When you swim, you arch your back, your head goes this way, and you're reaching your arms. So you're undoing what you're
opening up.
Right. Yoga, the different poses are doing that, and this is doing exactly the same thing. And as people get older, they get more hunched over, their head hangs lower. And we all know that these things are working against our general good health.
That is absolutely true, and I think we all have to be mindful of trying to do things that are going to reverse that natural tendency. The natural tendency is to slowly shrink and go inward, and it does require doing exercises that are going to open us up, and that's one of the things I like most about yoga. Do you think that younger musicians are more mindful of what it takes to stay healthy than perhaps the older generations?
A friend of mine who's about 16 years older than I am, who's a musician, used to say, you guys are such a different generation and you're so much healthier. And he was referring to the fact that we weren't drug addicts and alcoholics. And I mean, that's
a pretty low bar.
That's a pretty low bar, absolutely. Certainly in the crowd that I run with and the people that I've known, generally we're healthier that way. It's completely my casual observation, but I see a lot of young people being somewhat cavalier with regards to their general health, with regards to their diet, and are you someone who is exercising on a regular basis. When I've had students that have stayed with me for a long time and are, going towards a professional career path, I always encourage them to find some exercise. I warn them about the types of things.
Are they receptive to that, or is it just something that goes right over their head? Why do I have to be concerned about that?
No, I think they're receptive. Although generally now we're talking about students that I've been seeing for years who they're listening to me in the first place.
Let's switch from the physicality of it to the diet side of it. Now, musicians do have several obstacles against them, and just by the nature of your profession, you get home late at night, which means you're going to go to bed late, you're going to probably have a late night snack, you're eating a lot of your meals at gigs, and restaurant food is far less healthy than what you're going to cook at home in most instances. So I'm going to ask you a two-part question. The first part is if you can tell me the influence of your immigrant Italian grandmother on how you eat today. And the second part of it is what you do on a daily basis to be healthy.
The influence of my grandmother and her cooking is very much with me. Anyone who knows me will hear me speak about her. And I learned to cook, in her kitchen and my mom's kitchen watching. I rarely cook with a recipe ever.
Because she never cooked with the recipe.
Never cooked with a recipe. I cook like I play music, very, very improvisationally. We ate a pretty seasonal diet automatically. I try not to buy produce and fruits that come from very far away.
Yeah.
I don't buy melons in the wintertime. To me, it's silly. I buy apples in the wintertime, I cook fresh vegetables. That's one of the things. I rarely open up a can. Occasionally, if I'm making a tomato sauce. Although in the summertime, when the tomatoes are fresh and ripe, I never do that. I just chop up fresh tomatoes. And I do cook a lot for myself. I guess that's an important thing to think about. If you go in a restaurant and order a dish, what was it cooked in? Was it cooked in butter? Was it cooked in margarine? Was it cooked in any of those other oils that have been hydrogenated? You have no idea. And that's such an important part of your general health.
But that's the difference between eating in a restaurant and cooking at home.
Right.
Right. You have control over that.
You have control over it.
How much fun would it be to go into Whole Foods with your grandmother?
That's a funny question. I don't think she'd be impressed, to tell you the truth. Yeah, although I shop for many things in Whole Foods. I like it in many ways.
Yeah. You've had a very long, a very productive music career. Starting at a young age, you were 8 or 9 when you started playing?
I started to take lessons at 8 years old.
Okay. So was that something that gave you focus as you were growing up and going through the difficult teenage years, or did it get you into trouble?
In my case, it gave me focus.
Okay.
It really gave me a lot of focus from the time I was little, because I had to learn to be able to sit for an hour at a time to practice. And for a youngster like that, that's a great deal of concentration. By the time I was in high school, I looked a lot older. I talked myself into a job teaching music in the local music studio. I wound up teaching, I would say, on average 4 to 5 days a week. So it was really keeping me out of trouble. So I went from school to the studio, and I taught at the studio. Very often I'd be rehearsing with my friends, because I always had a band going. Always trying to do something.
You perform all the time in front of people. And can you talk about the effect of people watching live music, especially the way you play it?
Well, you really can feel it. Especially people who are open to listening to music. We played the other night over at the 76 House, where I played for years and years. A lot of our constituents come to see us there. So we have a receptive crowd. And we had a really fun night, people coming to sit in. Boy, the room, the swell of enthusiasm grew and grew, and everybody was happy. And I took a pause and I went around to say hello to folks. People were thrilled, and shaking my hand and clapping me on the back. It's a beautiful feeling. And you know, I'll go as far as to say that I think music, when musicians play together, there are studies that are done, people singing together get alpha brain waves that generally you would only get from meditating. I think that this begins to happen to the people that are listening as well. If you're paying attention and you're enjoying what you're hearing, there's a beautiful connection there.
You could have the most difficult, grueling day at work, but then you do go and you're listening to music at night and you're just transported into a different world, and it just changes everything. You've played for Music That Heals, and Music That Heals is a nonprofit organization in the New York metropolitan area that I think last year they had 600 performances, whether it be in nursing homes, whether it be in pediatric cancer centers, whether it be in hospice centers, and I know that you've performed for them. What's that like?
That's a beautiful thing. You know, I've been very, very pleased to work for Music That Heals and to have this experience. And this is one of the things that all of us who do that talk about, is this may be the last performance that these people will heal. Very often, I'm certain that's the case.
Yeah.
We go to Calvary Hospital, and I will actually stroll room to room. You know, some of the folks are not conscious, but we play anyway. Some of them are conscious and grateful. One of the Calvary hospitals we go to in the Bronx has a day room, and they bring folks down. They have movable chairs and bed type things, and they'll set folks up. So we do a little concert, and when we take a break, I make sure I go and say hello to the folks that are enjoying it. I played at the Perlmutter Cancer Center on 34th Street in New York, and a couple of times I had friends that were there for treatments that came down out of the elevator and saw me, and they were just thrilled, and stopped and listened to the music, and it's really been nice.
Well, you're lucky you're able to do that.
Listen, I'm blessed from top to bottom that this business, this career has worked out for me. And, there's a lot of sacrifices to do it, but the fact of the matter is I play for a living, and no matter what's going on, I can look down and say, oh, thank you. I'm getting to do a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think there are very few jobs that are truly meaningful, and I was very fortunate to practice medicine for as many years as I did, and despite the changes in the profession, which everyone complains about all the time, still it was just a very meaningful job. And I think being a professional musician is a meaningful job, and there just aren't enough of those.
Thank you.
So that's going to bring me to one of my last questions. So 2 out of my 3 children played music all through middle school, high school, and college. And more than anything, they loved the camaraderie that came with their playing. What is your advice for either a student or a parent of a student where that person is contemplating music as a profession?
I get asked this a fair amount. I remember an article I read in one of the guitar magazines. I'm pretty sure they were interviewing Mike Stern, a great jazz guitarist, played with Miles Davis and many others. And they said, what advice do you have to a young person who wants to be a professional guitarist? And he said, wants to be? Forget about it. I paraphrase. Has to be? This is the only thing that will do? Can't imagine doing anything else? Okay, now we can begin to chat. Mm-hmm. It's a tremendous amount of sacrifice. It's a very difficult career path. So because of that, I say to people who are thinking about it, this is not a choice to make, like, maybe I'll be a math teacher, or maybe I'll, try to become a research scientist. It's not like that, because there is no clear career path. So you really have to be driven to want to do it. I can give advice once we're there. Okay, learn to read, be able to play music by ear, you know, keep your nose clean, be a professional, show up on time.
Healthy lifestyle.
Right, we can go on. I mean, so much of it is basics.
But they have to have that inner...
That drive has to be there. This is the case for anybody who wants to make a profession in the arts.
Yeah.
The arts are a very difficult career path, and so, you know, you have to have a special drive. You know, I don't mean to discourage anyone by any means, but I want to say, hey, this is not something to do lightly. This is something to do because it's a calling.
Yeah.
It's not an offhand choice. You know, there are so many different career paths that one could take today, and you could just get, you know, training or college, and, you know, if you're a responsible person, you will make a living at it. This is not like that.
Well, I can't thank you enough for talking about healthy lifestyles and,
Well, it's my pleasure.
and musicianship.
Ah.